Hey guys, so I had a classmate send us this question. This is a homework problem from Alex. This is labeled a polynomial inequality type 4 problem. So let's jump in, let's work this out together and let's see what's going on. So when I work or when I solve inequalities, what I'm looking for is to get all of my terms on one side of that inequality sign. So I want to solve this like I would do any other equation. Typically I want zero. I want the equation equal to zero. So in this case I want my inequality with all my terms on one side and zero on the other. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this negative x to the other side by adding x, and I really don't have any like terms, so I'm just kind of throw it in this empty space here. And the reason I add x, remember, is that that's the opposite of subtracting x, or it's positive x is the inverse of a negative. So that just equals zero. I'm allowed to cancel that out because it equals zero. That's my additive inverse there, or my additive identity is zero. So that's what I'm trying to get here. So that leaves me with x cubed plus 4x squared plus x is less than or equal to negative 4. Alright, so I still don't have zero. What I want to do is move this 4 across, this negative 4, and the way I'm going to do that is by adding 4 to both sides, and that's going to leave me with x cubed plus 4x squared plus x plus 4 is less than or equal to 0. Now, once I get to this point, what I want to do is I want to factor this. If this was let's think about if this was a quadratic equation or just a regular polynomial equation, what I would do at this point is factor, right? I would factor, and then I would set each one of those terms equal to 0. Honestly, we're going to do that same process here. But my problem here is that this is not equal to 0. This is less than or equal to 0. So what we want to do is we want to change to an equation by setting this equal to 0. We're just going to change this to an equal sign there. So I'm not really going to rewrite it. Just know that in my next step, I'm going to replace that less than or equal to with an equals to. I'm going to factor that. Alright, so what I have here with this polynomial is 4 terms. I have 4 different terms here, and you have to ask yourself when you get to this step, depending on what your polynomial looks like, you may have a quadratic. In this case, we have a cubic function. Depending on the type of function you have, you may factor it a different way. Because I have 4 terms, 1, 2, 3, 4, what I'm going to do is I am going to factor by grouping. And what that means is I'm going to group these first 2 terms together, and I'm going to group these 2 terms together. And in each one of those groups, we're going to factor by taking out my greatest common factor. So what is my greatest common factor? Let's look at these 2 terms. What's the greatest term that those 2 terms, what's the greatest factor that those 2 terms have in common? What can I factor out? The greatest factor, the greatest common factor. What I see is that I have a 4 here, I don't have a 4 there, so I don't really have a numerical factor, a number that I can factor out. But what I see is that I have an x cubed and an x squared. Okay, so it looks like I may be able to factor an x out. But what you want to do is factor out the lowest degree of that variable, meaning I have an x cubed here, I have an x squared there. What we want to do is factor out this x squared. Okay, and when you factor, if some of us have trouble with factoring, which is fine, we're practicing that, we're still working on that. That's the point of this class and the point of this video. So what we want to do, essentially, when you are factoring, what you're doing is you are dividing each one of these terms. So in this case, this x cubed, I would divide that by my greatest common factor. And let's think about what happens when you divide like terms. when you divide like terms or divide terms with common bases, you subtract exponents. So that's going to be 3 minus 2, which is 1. Well, we don't write that exponent of 1, right? So we just leave it as just x, and we just put that as x to the first power, but we're just going to write it as x. So x cubed divided by x squared is x. Bring down that plus sign. Now we want to take this 4. Can you see this? Oh, we can't see that. Let me back this up. I'm not going to redo this video, but what this was saying, what I had here, and I've got to be careful. Again, this is my first time using this. What I put was that x squared divided by x was equal to x to the first power, or just x, right? So the second term here, I'm going to have that 4x squared divided by x squared. Well, look, I have an x squared and an x squared. That's going to reduce, which will just leave me with 4. So that would leave me with x plus 4 in my parentheses. How far down can I see here? My light board stops maybe about right there. Okay. So what I noticed on this side, class, is that I don't have a term that I can factor out. I have an x plus 4. I have an x. I have a 4. I don't have variables in both. I don't really have constants or coefficients that have common factors. So there's nothing there for me to take out. So I'm just going to leave this as x plus 4. And again, remember I said I was going to put equals 0. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here. Can I see this? Yes. So I'm going to factor this a bit more. If you do this correct, if you factor by grouping and you do it correctly, you should have the same terms inside of parentheses. So what that tells me is that x plus 4 is one of my factors. Okay, my other factor comes from what I have on the outside, and in this case it's going to be x squared plus my coefficient that I have here. And you don't really see it, but there is a 1 there, correct? So my coefficient there is a 1. We can write it there if we need to so that you can clearly see it. But my other factor will be x squared plus 1, and we're going to set that equal to 0. Now, the reason we set this equal to 0 is so that we can solve this polynomial equation. And we want to get our zeros, because we want to use our zeros to find our intervals that satisfies this expression. So let's solve this like we would do any other polynomial equation. We would take each one of my factors and set them equal to 0. Let me make some room. If at any point I erase something, remember you can always back this video up, pause it, and write down what I have. But at this point, I want to solve for x. I want to isolate this variable, and I'm going to do so by moving that 4 across the equal sign. And that's going to leave me with x equals negative 4. That is an important point for us. That is a 0 for this polynomial equation. Okay, we're going to use that in a little bit later. For this one, we can't see that. Oh, I'm on the edge of my light board again. So what I had here is that x squared plus 1 is equal to 0. I'm going to move that positive 1 across that equal sign, and what that's going to leave me with is x squared equals negative 1. Let's think about that for a minute. If I square a number, if I square positive 1, my output is positive 1. If I were to square, let's put square, negative 1, my output would again be positive 1. It does not matter. It doesn't matter if I square a positive number or if I square a negative number, my output will always be positive. So it is not possible for me to square a real number and get a negative number. So that is not helpful for us. This negative 4 right here, that is my only 0 for this real 0 for this polynomial equation. So let me erase some things here. Let's make some room. So what I'm going to do at this point, and I'm going to leave that there, but I'm going to draw a number line. And I'm just going to put -4 here on my number line. And what we're going to do is we're going to use that 0 to, you use how many zeros we have. And this is a special one because I only have one. Sometimes you may have 2. I could have had 3 because my degree here is 3. So I could have had up to 3. But what you would do is take each of your zeros, just put them in order on the number line, and you're going to test each part of your number line to see which one satisfies this expression here. Okay? For me, I only have 1 0, which means I only need to test this side of my number line and that side of my number line to see which one satisfies this expression. So what I want to do first is pick any number that's on this side of -4 on my number line. And an easy one for me might be -5. So I'm going to put, let's let x be equal to -5. And I don't have much room, so my box is here. Let me draw a little line so I know where my box is. So what I'm going to do is take -5 and plug that into that expression. So I have -5 cubed plus 4 times -5 squared is less than or equal to the opposite of -5 minus 4. Give me just a second. Let me erase this. And I would give you just a second to try to see if you can figure this out. Pause the video. Well, what is -5 cubed? If we were to cube -5, that would give us a -125. If I were to square -5, -5 times -5 gives me a +25. 4 times 25 gives me 100. Again, I'm going to put my inequality sign back in here. I'm plugging when I test these numbers, I want to test them into the original inequality. The opposite of a -5 is a +5, minus 4. So I have a -100 plus 100, -125 plus 100. That gives me -25 is less than or equal to 1. Is this a true or a false statement? This is true. So what that tells me is that this side of my number line satisfies this expression, okay? Satisfies that inequality. All right, so I can't stop. I can't be lazy. I've got to check my other side of my number line just to be on the safe side, because you never know what might happen. You might have all real numbers as a solution. So let's pick an easy number. Again, I'm lazy. I could let x be equal to 0. That's an easy number to substitute in. So plug 0 into this inequality. This is going to give me 0 cubed plus 4 times 0 squared, and I want to see if that's going to be less than or equal to -0 minus 4. Again, pause the video. See if you can get this. Simplify this on your own. Okay, what does this give us? This gives us 0 cubed plus 0 squared is 0, 4 times 0 is 0, is less than or equal to the opposite of 0, 0, right? 0 minus 4 is -4. So what I'm left with here is 0 is less than or equal to -4. Is this a true or a false statement? That is false. So this side of my number line does not work. So what I know, and because I have this equal sign, I do have something I need to include here, a bit different. What I know is that all of these values here, these work, okay? And because that equal sign, that equals to part here that I've been including, that tells me that I can actually include that -4 as part of my answer. So if I were to write this in interval notation, do I have room here? Let's write it up here. That arrow means that my solution set goes all the way to negative infinity. All right, but because I stop at -4 and because I have this equal to part on my inequality, I'm going to put -4 and a bracket, and that is it. That's my answer in interval notation. If you have any questions with this is a polynomial inequality problem type 4. If you have any other questions, guys, please don't hesitate to reach out.